Let me tell you about the most dangerous financial advice ever given to the middle class. It wasn't bad advice from a scammer. It wasn't a Ponzi scheme. It wasn't crypto. It was four completely normal, socially acceptable, widely celebrated words. Words your parents said. Words your teachers said. Words every personal finance influencer with a ring light and a Roth IRA has repeated 1,000 times. And those four words are, just save more money. That's it. That's the advice. And it sounds so reasonable, so responsible, so obviously correct that questioning it feels almost irresponsible. But here's the thing. For the average middle-class worker in 2026, saving more money is not a wealth-building strategy. It is a survival strategy dressed up as a financial plan. And the difference between those two things is the difference between running on a treadmill and actually going somewhere. And by the end of this video, I'm going to show you exactly why the saving more money advice isn't just incomplete. It's actively keeping millions of people from building real wealth. Not because saving is bad, but because the system surrounding savings was specifically designed to make sure your savings never become wealth. And that design is working perfectly. Let's start with the math that nobody wants to do out loud. The median household income in the United States right now sits at around $74,000 a year. After federal taxes, state taxes, and payroll taxes, the average middle-class family takes home somewhere around $57,000 to $60,000 annually. Now subtract the basics. Rent or mortgage, roughly $18,000 to $24,000 a year, depending on where you live. Groceries, around $8,000. Transportation, insurance, and car payments, roughly $10,000. Utilities, phone, internet, around $4,000. Healthcare out of pocket, another $3,000 to $5,000. And you're already at $43,000 to $51,000 in unavoidable baseline expenses before you've bought a single discretionary item. That leaves somewhere between $6,000 and $17,000 a year for everything else. Clothing, emergency fund, kids, entertainment, and oh yeah, saving for retirement. Let that sink in. The median middle-class family after taxes and basic living expenses has somewhere between $500 and $1,400 a month left over. And the financial advice industry's solution to building wealth is to save more of that, to squeeze harder. To cut the Netflix subscription and skip the avocado toast and somehow turn $800 a month in leftover income into generational wealth. It doesn't work. And deep down, everyone knows it doesn't work. But the advice keeps getting recycled because it puts the responsibility entirely on the individual, which is very convenient for every institution that profits from the current system staying exactly as it is. Which brings us to the real mechanism. Because the reason most middle-class workers never build wealth has nothing to do with discipline or intelligence or effort. It has to do with a concept that wealthy people understand instinctively and that nobody teaches in school. The difference between assets and income. Here's the core truth that the saving more advice completely ignores. Wealth is not built by accumulating income. Wealth is built by accumulating assets that generate income. And those are two completely different games with two completely different rulebooks. And the middle class, almost entirely, has been playing the wrong game. Think about it this way. A middle-class worker spends 40 years trading time for money. They get paid. They spend most of it on living. They save a little. They put it in a savings account, earning 0.5% interest, or a 401k that gets averaged down by fees. And at the end of those 40 years, they have a modest retirement account, a paid-off house if they're lucky, and very little else. Meanwhile, the top 10% of wealth holders in the United States own approximately 93% of all stocks and mutual funds. They own 80% of all non-home real estate. They own the businesses, the intellectual property, and the financial instruments that generate returns while they sleep. The middle class earns money. The wealthy own things that earn money. That's the whole game. And the saving more advice never addresses that gap, because it can't. because you cannot save your way from the first category into the second one. Not at $800 a month of leftover income. In a world where a single rental property costs $300,000 and a meaningful stock portfolio takes decades to compound into anything life-changing. And here's the psychology behind why this trap is so hard to escape. Because it's not just a math problem, it's a behavioral one. And this is where it gets genuinely interesting. Meet Sandra. Sandra is 34. She makes $68,000 a year working in healthcare administration. She is responsible. She has a 401k. She contributes 6% because that's what HR told her to do to get the employer match. She has a savings account with $4,200 in it that she's been trying to grow for 3 years. Every time it gets close to $6,000, something happens. Car repair, medical bill, her kid needs something, and it goes back down. Sandra is not irresponsible. Sandra is not bad with money. Sandra is experiencing something behavioral economists call the scarcity mindset. And it is one of the most well-documented and least discussed reasons why middle-class workers stay middle-class. The scarcity mindset was studied extensively by economists Sendil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir. Their research showed that when people operate under conditions of financial scarcity, the cognitive bandwidth available for long-term planning and decision-making actually decreases. In other words, being tight on money doesn't just feel stressful, it literally reduces your ability to make good financial decisions. The mental load of managing financial scarcity consumes cognitive resources that would otherwise go toward planning, investing, and thinking strategically about the future. Sandra isn't failing to build wealth because she lacks discipline. Sandra is failing to build wealth because the constant management of financial scarcity is consuming the exact mental resources she would need to think her way out of it. It's a trap with a psychological lock on the door, and the saving more advice hands her a key that doesn't fit. And now, layer in the behavioral finance side. Because the financial industry didn't just fail to solve this problem, it actively built products that profit from it. The average 401k in the United States charges somewhere between 0.5% and 2% in annual fees. That sounds small. Over 30 years of compounding, a 1% fee difference on a $200,000 portfolio costs you approximately $170,000 in lost returns. That is not a rounding error. That is a significant portion of a retirement. And most people have no idea what their 401k fees are because the industry spent decades successfully lobbying against requirements to disclose them clearly. The average savings account in the United States pays 0.46% in annual interest. Inflation runs at 2% to 4% in normal years and significantly higher in volatile ones. Which means the money sitting in the average savings account is losing purchasing power every single year. Saving more money in a savings account is not building wealth. It is slowly losing wealth in the most polite and socially acceptable way possible. And here's the historical parallel that makes all of this click. Because this isn't new. The keeping the middle class on a treadmill dynamic has a long history. In post-World War II America, the expansion of consumer credit was deliberately engineered to redirect middle-class income toward consumption rather than ownership. The introduction of the 30-year mortgage in the 1950s was celebrated as democratizing homeownership, and in fairness, it did. But it also ensured that the average middle-class family would spend 3 decades paying interest to a bank before they owned anything outright. The credit card industry followed the same playbook in the 1970s and 1980s. The student loan industry perfected it in the 1990s and 2000s. Each product followed the same design principle. Give the middle class access to things they couldn't otherwise afford in exchange for a permanent claim on their future income. Access without ownership. The appearance of prosperity without the substance of wealth. And the uncomfortable truth is that nothing about this design has changed. It has only gotten more sophisticated. Buy now, pay later apps have made the 1970s credit card look primitive. The subscription economy has turned one-time purchases into permanent monthly obligations. And the financial advice industrial complex, the influencers, the podcasts, the budgeting apps, the self-help books, continues to tell the middle class that the solution is personal responsibility and better habits, because that narrative costs the institutions nothing. And changing the actual structure of the game would cost them everything. So what actually works? Here's the short version, and none of it is revolutionary, but all of it is the opposite of what most people are actually doing. The first thing that works is understanding that the goal is not to save money. The goal is to own things, specifically, to own things that generate returns without requiring your time. That might be index funds held for decades with minimal fees. It might be a rental property. It might be equity in a small business. The specific vehicle matters less than the shift in mindset from accumulating income to accumulating assets. The second thing that works is fee awareness. Know exactly what every financial product you own is charging you. Your 401k fees, your fund expense ratios, your advisory fees if you use one. A 1% difference in fees over a working lifetime is not a small number. It is potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. The third thing that works is rejecting the comparison game entirely. The scarcity mindset is made exponentially worse by social comparison. Every lifestyle upgrade that happens because someone around you upgraded is a direct transfer from your asset column to someone else's. The middle-class wealth trap runs on social pressure as much as it runs on math. The fourth thing that works is understanding that time in the market beats everything else. A middle-class worker who invests $400 a month consistently from age 25 to 65 inches, a low-cost index fund averaging 7% annual returns, ends up with approximately $1.1 million. The same person who waits until 35 to start ends up with roughly $520,000. The 10-year delay costs more than half the outcome. Not because of discipline, because of math. And here's where I land on all of this. The most dangerous financial lie told to the middle class isn't that crypto is a good investment or that prop trading is a career path. Those lies are at least obviously risky. The most dangerous lie is the one that sounds responsible, that gets repeated by well-meaning people, and that quietly ensures the game never changes. The lie that the solution to not having enough wealth is to be more careful with the small amount of money you have left after a system that was designed to extract it from you has already taken its share. Save more isn't bad advice. It's just advice that was never designed to get you out of the middle. It was designed to keep you stable inside it, and stable is not the same as free. So, here's where I want to know where you land. Option A. You think the middle-class wealth gap is fundamentally a personal responsibility problem, and better habits and more discipline are the answer. Option B. You think the system is structurally designed to keep middle-class workers on a treadmill, and individual behavior changes can only go so far against that design. Option C. You think both are true, and the real answer lives somewhere uncomfortable in the middle. Drop it in the comments, because this one hits differently depending on where you're sitting when you watch it. Because here's the thing about wealth. It doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't care about your work ethic. It doesn't care about how responsible you've been. It only cares about one thing: whether you own something that grows while you sleep. And for most of the middle class, nobody ever told them that was the game. They were too busy being told to save more.